had a number of members of Congress here to pray. We prayed for our nation and for peace in Jerusalem, peace for Israel. And we're so grateful to be joined by all of our friends. Thank you.
So, Dan, I thought these members of Congress were supposed to be representing the American people, but it seems more and more we get essential emissions like Ted Cruz gave to Tucker Carlson that they care most about Israel. And I think a part of it really has to do with this end times prophecy. What do you make of this?
Yeah, talk about not reading the room. They're not reading the room. We talked a little bit on the Liberty Report about this today. Is that remember, Speaker Johnson adjourned early for August recess because Massey's vote on releasing the Epstein files was looming, and it's a privileged resolution. The way you bring it up, I don't remember the exact details, but it guarantees you a hearing on the floor if you have enough co-sponsors. So it was guaranteed for a vote. And Johnson freaked out and said, "Okay, let's go home, guys." So there's no time to do things like this. There's no time to do there's no time to do the proper appropriations bills. We have to do a big omnibus each year because they can't be bothered to do their constitutional duty and spend the people's money appropriately. But so they can't wait to get out of town and go on another AIPAC junket to Israel. The thing is, Kyle, I'm a religious person personally, but I don't want to live in a theocracy. And for all of these end timesers who were screaming about the mullahs, that's exactly how they're behaving. They're behaving like the mullahs. They're behaving like we have a state religion that we must husband all of our national resources to further. And sorry, Mike, but not all of us believe like you do personally about how end times will come about. I don't care what you believe. But when you take my money and you perhaps conscript my children to fight for this vision that you have, that's where there's a problem. And I know that I'm not alone in this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is going to be seen as highly unpopular, particularly as more Americans are going to, they really want to know what was behind the probably greatest underage sex trafficking network in the history of this country. And yet he adjourns early to avoid a vote on that and then runs off to, it's not even that he's, saying that we have to go hear from our constituents. We need no, his constituents are the Israeli West Bank settlers, I guess. That's who he wants to hear from. That's what he wants to go see. Now, Dan, do you think the problem was this significant when you were in the halls of Congress and Dr. Ron Paul's office?
Well, it was as significant in a manner of speaking, because it was much more difficult to speak out about Israeli control of the U.S. Congress. Remember back in the I think it was the late '90s or early 2000s when Pat Buchanan talked about Congress being Israeli occupied territory, and it was genuinely shocking when he said it. We believed it, but you're not supposed to say it out loud. And he, of course, was condemned as an anti-Semite, as were other people who would recognize these things. And this goes all the way back to "They Dare to Speak Out," which was a fundamental book about how Congress is manipulated. It was back from the 1970s and 80s, manipulated by that lobby. So they dared to speak out back then, but now we can't speak out because there are too many people who are noticing this and who don't like it. You can't call them all anti-Semitic. And as a matter of fact, many of them are Jewish. They don't like what's happening. So the problem was as bad. And I think to use what the kids say these days, the white pill, is that we can talk about it and that it's actually a liability now. People are PO'd uh, on X when they see Johnson and all these goofballs over there praying to some wall and doing all sorts of weird things. They don't like it. It's a liability, and they'll be the last ones to recognize this. That no, you're not getting any brownie points for this. In fact, the American people despise you for abandoning us. I was talking to Dr. Paul on the show today. I said, "Sir, you remember this? In August, you go to all these town hall meetings. You get with your constituents. You get to understand their problems. All the things you can't really do when the House is in session. That's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. Not to run off to some junket and pet a bunch of cows. It's weird."
Right.